My stage hands, y'all. I'm bringing them up. I'm raising them right. How are you guys today? Good, good. I was actually going to come in here on a zip line this morning, but I'm still recovering from shoulder surgery, so I figured this will do. So here I am. But for those of you guys who do not know me, my name is Shane Paris, and I've been leading the student ministry out here at Forest Park for the last 4 years now. My wife and I, we've actually been attending this church for the last 8 years, since 2011, so that's crazy to believe, actually crazy to think that I'm old enough to be doing something for 8 years. You know, when you're young and you hear, you know, your parents have been married for 10 years, you're like, whoa, it's an eternity. And now that I've been married for 6, it does feel like an eternity, right? But as you know, a lot happens in the course of 8 years, especially when you start adding kids to the mix. This is our family right here. Actually, that was my 5-year-old Tatum that brought my podium out. This is my wife, Sydney. You've probably seen her running around here with her camera. She's been doing the photography here at Forest Park for the last few years, and thank God for that woman. She is the glue to our family. And then our 5-year-old Tatum, as you just saw, he's a ball of energy, okay? And he thinks he runs things. He is his mama's twin. If you look at it up close, he's his mama's twin in a lot of different ways. But yeah, that's our 5-year-old. And then Brooks, the butterball right there that I'm holding, he's the biggest bundle of joy. There's not a bad day that you can have and come home and see him and him not make it better. But this is my family, you guys. And if you do anything, if I can ask you to do anything, it would be that do not look at this picture and think this is what our life looks like all the time, okay? This is a false representation of what our life actually looks like. You know, to be honest, this was actually captured a couple weeks ago in the Outer Banks, and we had to run south for about 20 minutes running from a storm to Pea Island just to get this shot. So that's the behind-the-scenes footage. That's the stuff you don't see when you see these beautiful family pictures, right? You don't see the kids fighting and the throw up from the baby and the food, and that's what was actually going on behind the scenes. You know, that's real life. That's actually what we go through, the moments, the memories, you know, what this series has been all about, the change. You see, over the last 8 years, our family has gone through a tremendous amount of change. Some of you have been through it with us. You've been along this journey. Some of you, we've met you as we've gone along. But just to give you some context of what that looks like, it started when Sydney and I were both 20 years old. All right, at 20 years old, we were young, we were dumb, not a worry in the world. How many of y'all remember 20, right? Don't smile too hard, I know. You see, we were the couple that made you sick on social media, you guys. Like our Facebook memories pop back up and we literally gag, right? They do. They make us gag all the time. You see, at this time, we were both still living with our parents. We were working part-time jobs, taking college courses. Whatever money we spent went straight to Three Amigos or Toyamas. Y'all feel me? That's what our priorities were. Yes, amen. That's what our priorities were. No bills, no debt, just me, her, pure bliss, right? In Elizabeth City. You see, you married folks remember those days. Fast forward 2 years later, and by this time, our life had changed a little bit. Our priorities had changed a little bit. We experienced our first trip together in Ecuador. We came back. We started serving here at the church. We got baptized together and engaged in the same day. So we were making some changes in our life, but we were still young, dumb, not a worry in the world. Everything else was the same. You see, until one night, we were driving home. We were driving to a friend's house on Lover's Lane, and Sydney randomly pulls the car over. I was like, yo, what's about to happen? All right? I didn't know what was about to happen, and by this point, Sydney got really serious. She got really serious, and that's when she looks at me and she says, Shane, I'm pregnant. All right, we were 22 years old. At this point, 22 years old, and when she first told me that, I was shocked, but I was very excited at the same time, hence the reason I'm standing here today. And I showed it. I showed it right then and there until she told me that we had to tell our parents. I was like, oh yeah, because my mom's ratchet, okay? And let me remind you guys that we both lived with our parents. We were both still in college, working part-time jobs. The situation was not necessarily the best to bring a baby into. But at 22-year-old Shane in me, confident, I haven't experienced nothing that was reality yet. I was like, we got this. We got this. And we did. We worked through it. And a lot of it was because of our family. We had to move our wedding up. We started planning that. We completely renovated our home throughout that time. Within 6 months, I started my senior year of college, and I worked as many hours as I could at the Y. It was a season. It wasn't easy, but we made it work. And we did all of that, and we managed to have a pretty awesome wedding, and we managed to have a honeymoon, and we managed to do those things, but we had to make a lot of changes in our life. We had to prioritize some things that we hadn't thought about before. That was a season, but that season taught me a lot. Those seasons teach us who we really are, right? It taught me about how unpredictable life can be, how 2 days can never be the same. It taught me that if you're going to get through this, you're going to have to pull your bootstraps up and get through this. You're going to have to man up. It taught me who I really was on the inside, my struggles, my doubts, my insecurities. I mean, it really pulled out who Shane was. But that's what happens when you go through those seasons. It also taught me a lot about my wife and how resilient she is. See, and that was the foundation that we started with. So it wasn't perfect. It wasn't this fairy tale, but we had to make some changes. We had to change our priorities. We had to put ourselves around people who were doing it and who have done what we wanted to do. We had to put ourselves around people that had kids, that had families, that were doing good things in the community, that showed that, their priorities are lining up with where we wanted to be. Because at 22, our friends weren't there yet. They weren't. We put ourselves in environments like here at Forest Park on Sunday mornings and in small groups consistently. And that's what makes this place so special to our family, because over the last 8 years, if it wasn't for the people that walked through this journey with us, we would not be here today. With everything that we encountered, if it wasn't for those people, then this message wouldn't even be possible. But there's a reason for this message this morning. You see, and right now, I've got 2 kids, which means we're stressed out twice as much. I'm just kidding. But really, now prioritizing our life is that much more important. And one of the biggest priorities that we have is raising our kids in church. I know it sounds cliche. I know it sounds like the Southern thing to do, but it doesn't take very long here to realize that it's that important. It didn't take me long listening to Scott's messages to realize I need those messages in my life right now. It didn't take long. And just not Scott, but over the last few weeks, we've had an opportunity to hear from some of the most influential men in our church. We got to hear from Davin and Brad and Jason, and we got to listen to them bring the message. You see, at 27 years old, if there's anything I've learned, is that a smart man makes a mistake, learns from it, and never makes that mistake again. But a wise man finds a smart man and learns from him how to avoid the mistake altogether. It sounds easy, right? It sounds good. It sounds great. You see, but this quote right here, as much as I love it, it contradicts every single thing that Jason shared last week. It contradicts it. You see, it says a wise man finds a smart man. You can go to the next slide. A wise man finds a smart man and learns from him how to avoid the mistake altogether. To a certain extent, I've been able to manage this in my life. But it's not reality. You see, what Jason shared last week was, I do understand what I do. For what I want to do, I do not do. But what I hate to do, I do. See, that sounds more like me. In other words, I know what I've done is wrong because I saw that fool over there make that same decision and he got punished for it. You see, but I know what the right thing to do is, but I don't always seem to make the right decision sometimes. Even when I hate myself for making those decisions when it's over. Who can relate to that? Just me? That's human nature. Don't you wish life was as easy as seeing some other fool make a mistake? And just by telling yourself, I'd never do that, you don't? Side note, how many of you got kids in here? Exactly, it sounds like raising children, right? Before you had kids, you probably could have written a bestseller on raising kids. And then you had kids and you realized how stupid you were. Ignorant. Or what about your friends who give you advice on raising kids and they don't even have kids themselves? You realize how stupid they are too, right? You want a good message this morning? If you don't have kids, don't give people advice on raising kids, okay? Take a picture of that. If you don't have kids, don't give people advice on raising kids. That'll preach right there. That'll preach. You see, the reason I bring up our kids is because this whole series has been about making changes in our personal life that will add value to us and every single person around us, and that impacts our kids. You see, over the last few weeks, Davin, Jason, and Brad have shared personal stories and obstacles and opportunities and struggles and a whole lot more. You see, it's caused some of us to reevaluate our purpose and our strengths and how much we can benefit from those things and how much those can benefit this community as a whole in our homes. You see, we've been challenged to master the moment in our everyday lives daily. And most importantly, we've been reminded of the importance of being intentional. That's what this series is. This series has been and can be life-changing, okay, if we allow it to be. For some, that makes sense. For others, it seems far-fetched to think that a Sunday message can change your life, especially when it's a 28-year-old guy, all right? But it's true. You see, this series could actually make a difference in your life. You see, but it doesn't just happen. You're not just going to stroll out of here after a Sunday morning message and it just happened. Life change doesn't work that way unless you choose it. You see, when you're in school, when you're taking classes in college, whatever you do, you take that information and you go home and study, right? When you hire a personal trainer, you not only show up at the gym, but you take that home and you apply it in the kitchen. At least you're supposed to. I don't do that very well, but that's what you do. When you're really training for a sport, you also put in extra reps outside of practice. It's just what you do. Now, you either do or you don't do these things, but the difference will be evident in your grades, your health, and your performance. So let me ask you guys this. What are you doing with the message we give you when you leave this place on Sunday mornings? What are you doing with it? Because there's only one thing that separates a Sunday sermon and the impact that it can have on your life, and that's what you do with it when you actually leave this place. So before we move any further today, I'm going to ask you guys a set of questions, and I actually want you to raise your hands, all right? And for this to work out, we need honesty, so don't be lying in church, okay? The first question is, how many of you fully understand that you are not perfect? Yes. How many of you would admit to making mistakes on a daily basis? How many of you would openly admit that you aren't perfect, you make mistakes on a daily basis, and if people really knew what you struggled with, they would be shocked? Great. Admitting you're jacked up is the first step for everyone, okay? So thank you. You see, every single person in this room could raise their hands for those three questions. I don't care who you are. To those of you who have kids, though, I want you to raise your hands when I ask you this question. Do you fully understand that you are by far the most influential person in your child's life? Do you fully understand that you are by far the most influential person in your child's life? By far, you guys, you are. And to think that we as a church, we as a community, we as a body of people, we make mistakes daily. We are not perfect. We have our own skeletons in the closet, yet He chose us to be the most influential figures in the lives of our children. That, my friends, is called grace. That's grace. And that's how I have to see it every single day. When I'm having a bad day, I can look at my kids and remind myself, wow, I don't even deserve this, but I have this. It's scary to think that with all of my baggage, all of my hang-ups, my habits, my cravings, my personal flaws, with all of it, I am still the greatest influence in Tatum and Brooks' life. And at the end of the day, when the world around us screams that your paycheck, your body, and your performance should be your number one priority, it is that simple truth, the scale of your influence, that makes walking into a church on a Sunday morning more than just a high to get you through the week. Or at least it should be. It is that very reason why series like this can actually change your life and not just stir up a little emotion. But not by simply hearing it, but by taking everything you learn here and applying it. So if you've got your phone, pull it out. That's a stupid question. Pull your phone out, take notes, write some of these things down, not just today, but as we move forward, because that's the only way life change happens, you guys. Do whatever you can to absorb and apply this information. And today, I want to talk about influence, because we all have it. We've all experienced it, both good and bad. And I'm sure that we can all agree that the people that raised us, those individuals that raised us, both good and bad things, we have become those people in some way, shape, or form, whether we like it or not. You know, I want you to think about when you're growing up. Some of you probably grew up in great homes. You had two parents to take care of you, give you everything you need mentally, physically, emotionally. You would absolutely agree that because of the way that your parents handled their marriage, their finances, their obstacles, and life in general, because they handled those things well, you have a clear picture of what marriage looked like today. You're confident in what God looks like today because of the way that you were raised when you were a child. Now others, you grew up in a home that wasn't necessarily a great home, but it wasn't bad either. Maybe you had what you needed physically, okay? But your parents, maybe they weren't around as much to talk about certain issues or things that were going on inside of you. You know, maybe everything with your parents was very surface level and they just didn't scratch that surface. And because of that, there are things that you're struggling with and you had questions as a child, but because you had nobody to talk to about those things, you just bottled them up. And here we are today. And because of that, it has left you lacking something emotionally or even mentally. Shoot, maybe both of those environments sound like a fairy tale to some of you guys. Some of you in here may may not even know your father. You may not even know your mother, and because of it, there's a void in your life and you haven't been able to fill it. Maybe you're here today and you wish you would never have even known your mom or dad. It was that bad. Maybe they had an issue with addiction of some sort, or physical or mental or emotional abuse. Maybe they had issues growing up. And they put you in that environment, and because of that environment, they painted a blurry picture of what life looks like, what marriage looks like, and what God looks like. See, fortunately, I grew up with both of my parents. They divorced when I was 9 years old, but when my dad moved out, he stayed here in Elizabeth City. So I had both of my parents, but overall, I grew up in a home where I knew that I was loved. I knew that I was loved, and if hard conversations had to be had, we did. But a lot of those conversations only happened if I got caught or if something needed to be addressed. So other than that, as long as everything seemed right on the outside, there was nothing to talk about, right? So what did I do? I made sure everything looked good on the outside. Because isn't that what we do? You know, our social media looks good, our clothes look good, everything looks good, so there won't be any questions. See, now there's a lot to my story, and if I really dove into it, you would believe that my family could have aired on Jerry Springer, for real. My grandfather was actually on Jerry Springer, fun fact. So that's who's preaching you today. God bless. But I know that there are definitely people out there who had it way worse than me, though, too. So I can't sit here and cry, woe is me, but because there was a lack of real conversation, a lack of proactive, what to expect, how to respond conversations, I began dealing with everything the only way I knew how: sex, alcohol, porn, and drugs. If I didn't know how to actually approach it, if I didn't know how to actually fix the issue, I knew how to address it to make it all feel better. And that's why this conversation is so important. Because when I get to the end of my life, I want to be able to look back and know that I instilled everything I could into my boys. And that means having conversations about things they need to be prepared for in their life. And not just having conversations, but actually modeling the qualities that we talk about too. That's huge. You see, my hope is that when my boys grow up, they know exactly what it takes to love their wife because of the way they watch me love their mom. That's a big deal for me. My hope is that they will choose respect no matter where they are, because they watch the way that I spoke to the cashier, the police officer, the waitress, and even the people who didn't agree with me at times. That's my hope. My hope is that when they grow up, they will choose to love and accept first, regardless of skin color, sexual orientation, nationality, political views, or anything else for that matter. You see, these are just the few of the good things that I hope my kids pick up. But I also hope they learn from my failures too, because I've got a lot of them. You see, our children are watching every single thing we do: how we think, how we treat others, how we pray, how we talk about those who are hurting, how we talk about those who are hurting us. That's a big one. How we handle our finances, how we make decisions in tough situations, how we respond to pain, what we eat, how we eat, and how often we eat. That's a big thing too. My 5-year-old thinks we can have ice cream after every meal because I do it, okay? So I'll take that one. You see, what we watch on TV, our kids picked up. How consumed we are on social media. That's a big one. How we prioritize, how we drive our car in traffic, all right, at 5 p.m. in Virginia on a Monday. They watch those things. When we're happy, when we're sad. How we talk about those who are less fortunate, how we handle conflict. How much we value our faith. This list never ends, which makes the conversation of change in your home an important one. It makes the conversation around being an intentional parent with specific expectations a priority on a platform like this. Because I promise you, throughout this conversation, I will in no way be telling you how to raise your child. But I would do everything I can to challenge you to change you. Because that's what this is about, changing us. Because if you're anything like me, you need a wake-up call sometimes. You need it. So I'm really excited about what we're going to dive into this morning. And before we do that, let's bow our heads because I want to pray real fast. Father, thank you so much for every single person in this room today. Thank you for every parent in this room today. When it comes to loving our spouses and loving our children, these are the two of the hardest yet greatest purposes you put in our life. And I pray that today's message speaks to those individuals in this room. I pray that it serves as a wake-up call for some people in here today. I pray that this message challenges some people to walk a little different when they leave here, not on a high, but with some form of direction and opportunities to apply it in their life, even when it's hard. Lord, speak today to all of us, and it's in your name we pray. Amen. See, today I want to be as clear as I can getting my message across to you guys. And just so you know, I can only deliver a message like this today because I have to live it on a daily basis. And sometimes, y'all, living it isn't pretty. It's not. But today, regardless if you're a parent or not, today's message is for you. Because you will either someday be a parent, and even if you are not, or even if you choose not to be, your role is just as vital. Some of the best coaches, teachers, and influential figures in my life were not parents, and they were not my own. And in a lot of cases, as a child, some of the most influential figures in my life were kids themselves. They were teenagers or young adults that I looked up to and wanted to be like. So this message is for you. So regardless if you're a parent or not, your scale of influence matters, okay? But specifically for parents, you need to know one thing. You must simply believe that you are vital to the health and development of your child. You've got to believe that. Because if you don't believe that to begin with, there's no why. There's no purpose behind what we're doing. So you've got to believe it. You've got to believe that you are responsible for equipping and preparing your child for the rest of your life. That's scary, right? To think that we've been given that responsibility, but it's true. Research and social studies support the fact that the parent-child relationship significantly impacts a child throughout his or her lifetime. The parent's role and involvement is essential to the child's development of emotional health, academic advancement, and making significant life decisions. We have seen this play out in our own lives. I don't even have to explain. This means when it comes to our children, it can't be their teacher's responsibility or their student pastor's responsibility. It can't be their coach's responsibility or anybody else's for that matter to pour into our kids. We as a whole, we have got to begin taking responsibility for that, for our children right now. And we must begin with the belief that our role is significant. Because when it's confusing, when it's difficult, near impossible, it's supposed to be. These things did not show up with an how-to manual, okay? My kids did not pop out with the 5-minute YouTube clip to show me how to operate, all right? It's not that easy. It's not as easy. It's definitely not as easy as these people make it look, right? That's not life. It's not that easy. But it's not supposed to be easy because we are all rookies. We are all rookies. Let me explain. Last year at a marriage conference, they had a breakout session specifically for dads. The whole session could be best described as an opportunity to remind us men how important our roles are in our home. But one of the biggest things I took away from that whole session was the idea that we are all rookies. The day Tatum was born, Sydney and I were rookies. We've never raised a child before. And that first poop, y'all, was no joke, okay? I've never had to experience anything like that before. I was a rookie, but we figured it out and we worked through it. Then you fast forward to today, and now we're raising two boys, two completely different ages, different milestones. And in this season, we are rookies because we've never raised a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old before, ever. The moral of the story is we are all rookies. Every single season brings new challenges and challenges we've never been confronted with before. You are a rookie right now. And what makes it even better, that throughout all of it, we're not just managing the different seasons of our children's lives, we're also managing everything in between, right? Bills, marriage, work, schedules, more bills, life. No wonder it's so easy just to back up and just let everything go and just go through the motions. And, it's so easy to attempt to quick fix everything when it comes to our kids. And it's not effective at all. It's easy for me to do that. Sydney has to remind me sometimes. You see, especially when we're tired, especially when we're burned out, and especially when we have our own issues to deal with. But that's why this is important to absorb and learn and put yourself out there. And meet people who are doing it not perfect but well, that can teach us a thing or two. That's why I love hearing from people like Brad, who was just up here a couple weeks ago. His whole message was on mastering the moment. It was on being resilient and continuing to express gratitude on a daily basis. Right now, Brad's a rookie. He may have some gray hairs poking through, but he is a rookie. He's never had to manage a son who is a freshman in college before, which means it's also just as important for him to seek out the right people. We don't ever stop learning, you guys, ever. So regardless if your kids, they're 2 years old, they're 5 years old, they're 18 or they're 28, I know that I myself still need advice on a daily basis. I still need advice on marriage. I still need advice on a lot of things. I still need my dad. I still need my mom. Not as much as I once did, not for the same reasons, but a part of me still needs them. You see, a lot of you know, or you saw me in a sling, but back in March when I dislocated my shoulder, I dislocated it for the 7th time. And needless to say, I finally scheduled an appointment to go get it looked at. I went and got my MRI, and sure enough, I'd completely torn my labrum all the way through, and they had to put 7 anchors in it. So there was a lot going on over the last 4 or 5 months, physically, mentally, emotionally, and I had to have surgery. And along that journey, I received a phone call from our insurance company notifying me that they would not cover any of my surgery due to the fact that it initially happened 8 years ago on a football field. What a blow, right? I've already had to deal with the injury itself, the surgery, the recovery, everything in between, and now this. But it wasn't 5 seconds later that my phone started ringing, and it was my dad. And I told him everything that was going on. And what you need to know is that over the last 7 or 8 months, my dad has been dealing with some of his own mess, far worse than anything that I've got going on. And in that moment, he told me, he said, "Shane, it's going to be all right. All you can do is place your faith in God, and he will work out the rest." And I know it sounds cliche, and I know it sounds phony, but as soon as he told me that, I knew everything was going to be all right. There was this overwhelming feeling of peace that came over me. You know why? Because it was my dad. And no matter how many times he's failed in the past, his influence will always carry some weight in my life. And if you've ever heard me talk about my dad, we have come a long way. We've had some very hard conversations that have caused us to not talk for months, almost a year one time. But you know what? He's not perfect, and I don't ever think he's going to be a saint, and I don't expect that. But right now in this season, he's been there for me. And we've talked about things that we've never talked about before, faith and failures in life. But he's not perfect. Like, I legit still have him blocked on Facebook. And I told him whenever he decides to post anything worth reading that's not political, I'll add him back. And he'll be here today, so I can't wait to share that with him. But the reason I share that with all of you guys is because it's never too late. It's never too late to start being intentional about your relationship with your kids. Even if it seems impossible, even if it is, it's as simple as a phone call every now and again. Conversations about important stuff, even if it's about what's going on in the world right now. We have got to take action in some way, even if it's small, and just do it, because it takes more than just believing that you play a vital role. You see, belief is big, but turning belief into action is even bigger. And intentional actions reap powerful rewards. So how intentional are you? How intentional have you been? Because if I'm only being honest, I don't believe it's even possible to become over-intentional when it comes to parenting. I don't. You see, being intentional actually means you have to evaluate your own life, figure out what's important, and sometimes when you do that, you actually realize where you went wrong in the past. Magically, that happens. You see, check out this list. Some of you have probably seen this list before, but this is like the go-to Christian priority list right here, okay? And typically when you use this list, the idea is to use it as a self-awareness tool, as a guide or a benchmark. And as basic as it seems, as basic as it is, intentional parents are clear about these priorities and in this order. 1, God, 2, marriage, 3, your kids, 4, career, and then 5, everything else, your hobbies, your interests, everything else. You see, now this list is for you, but right now we're going to talk about this list and how we can implement some of these priorities in our own daily lives. You know, and by doing that, we'll have an even greater impact on our kids and an even greater influence on our kids. And that number 1 we're going to start with is God. You see, I've heard this time and time again. If the vertical isn't right, then the horizontal isn't going to be right. Which means, in other words, if I'm not focused on Him and what He's telling or showing me, then it's going to impact all of the other relationships around me. It will. It has an impact on my kids, my ministry, and everything else. So this is huge, and it's definitely not the easiest one, especially in our convenient culture. You see, but if we don't prioritize our time with God, meaning our prayer time, our reading time, our quiet time, and even going to church on Sundays, if we do not prioritize these things, do you believe our children ever will? They won't. I mean, maybe if they're lucky, they might meet somebody who's intentional about it along the way, but we just can't hope that that happens. We just can't hope that somebody comes in and does our job. We can't, because your influence will have a far greater impact than mine ever will as a student pastor if you're intentional, I promise. It will. And nobody, I mean nobody in this world is going to have your God, your spouse, or your children as high on a priority list as you will. Nobody. So like Brad said, we have got to master the moment. We have to before dinner, before bed, before ball games, maybe dance recitals, or in the middle of the night after waking up from a nightmare. We have got to master the moments and use these as opportunities to pray with our kids. These are your opportunities to show them how to express gratitude, how to respond to anxiety and stress, and how to cope with fear and the unknown. This is mastering the moment. A few months ago, Tatum had to get some dental work done in his mouth. And Tatum hates the dentist. We all hate the dentist, but Tatum hates the dentist. He won't even let them get in his mouth, okay? So he had to get some dental work done a few months ago. And he was freaking out. And before they went, they were in the parking lot. And Sydney asked Tatum if she could pray with them about it. And they did. And they went in and got the job done. Well, about a month or so later, they had to go back. And before they went in, Tatum looked at Sydney and he said, "Mom, will you pray with me? I'm scared." And it's in those moments right there that you know you're mastering the moment. Just using everyday opportunities as opportunities to actually show your child how to approach situations like that. Rather than just wandering through life with all of this anxiety and stress, that's mastering the moment. See, mastering the moment means doing little things like this to teach your kids how to one day do it on their own and with their families. I tell my son that all the time. We'll be outside messing around in the garage or something, and I'll tell him, "Son, you're going to do this with your boys one day." "I am?" "Yep." One day I told him, I said, "Son, you're going to grow up and do big things one day." He said, "Am I going to have a mustache?" And I was like, oh my gosh. Yes, maybe. See, guys, we're not raising future kids. We are raising future adults. I know you've seen that everywhere. You see, our kids are going to experience a completely different world than we ever did. I mean, look at all of the opportunities around us right now, both good and bad. They will experience a different world than you and I grew up in. Look at the convenience to access things that used to take hours, days, months, years, like that. We live in a post-Christian world, which means that Christianity is not at the foundation like it used to be. To be honest, we're probably at the completely opposite end of the spectrum today than we've ever been. So what you do at home, what you're doing with your kids, it matters. So what can you do differently? What can you start doing? Because we're always rookies, which means this moment right here, this moment right now, since we are rookies, we'll never get it back, and we have got to take advantage of every chance we get. Because the moment that you stop growing, the moment that you stop learning, our kids will feel it. Our kids will feel it. So we must begin to prioritize these things. We must begin to prioritize this list, because we all know how hectic, busy, and all over the place our schedules become, right? They do. We see it in our own home. Routine is a big deal with Tatum. And it's like every time we begin to see progress or implement changes in our life, we see it. They have impacts on him. If our schedules change or our routine gets thrown off, it happens, and we all get busy. It's like a meme I saw the other day, and it said, every time I try to eat healthy, along comes Christmas, Easter, summer, Friday, and Tuesday, and ruins it for me. Now, that's a bit dramatic, but that's life, right? That's what happens. We get started on these routines, and we get started, I'm going to do this year, or I'm going to start doing this every morning, and we get started, and then we realize how mundane it is, and we get bored with it, and we stop. But it's in the mundane. It's in those moments where we find that life change that we've been talking about. That's why our relationship with God has to be so much more than a Sunday high. See, Sunday highs don't prepare our kids. All they do is create false expectations. That's all they do. You see, I've been in plenty of services where I didn't leave with a Sunday high. But it wasn't the pastor's fault or the band's fault because I didn't get any goosebumps that day. You see, to be honest, about 6 years ago, Sydney and I actually looked at each other during a Sunday service here at Forest Park and questioned whether or not we felt like we should stay here or not. But it's because we were being selfish. You see, it was all based on our false expectations. We were relying on Scott to feed us when we walked in on a Sunday morning, but we were failing to feed ourselves Monday through Saturday. Your relationship with God is vital, but it can only be your relationship. We cannot survive off of anybody else's faith. And if it hasn't been a priority, your relationship with your spouse will suffer. And that leads me to priority number 2, and that's marriage. You see, if you're not married, maybe you've got kids and you're dating someone, or maybe you're dating someone with kids, don't look at Doug, okay? One of the single greatest things we can do to ensure our kids grow up in one of the single greatest things we can do to ensure that our kids grow up with a healthy view of marriage is to actually be intentional about focusing on ours. This is a hard one, y'all. Marriage, it's tough. I've done a lot of hard things in my life, but marriage is tough. But it's because you constantly have to work on it. You either work on it and it's going to be tough, or you don't work on it and it's going to be tough. Regardless, it's tough, right? You see, and I'm definitely not up here turning this sermon into one where I'm giving you guys marital advice, because I'm a rookie. But I am confident in knowing that one of the greatest things that I'll do, one of the greatest things that you'll ever do, is love your spouse. One of the greatest things you can do for your kids is love your spouse. It is. This means that even though my wife stays home with the kids, I still come home and I'll do dishes if they need to be done, or I'll vacuum or fold laundry. Whatever it is around the home that needs to be done, I'll help out with. Why? Other than the brownie points, I know that there's a good chance that what I model around our home will be some of the same things that my boys do when they get older. It's going to be some of the same things that they do when they're married and they're walking through life. You see, and if I can just show them, not just tell them what love and respect looks like, it might actually rub off on them. And I don't get this right all the time. Actually, I probably get it wrong more times than I get it right. But it's not about being right. If anything, it's just about being aware. It's simply about being aware of the fact that our relationship with God impacts our relationship with our spouse. Our relationship with God and our relationship with our spouse impact our relationship with our children. And our children are watching and absorbing everything. See, when I was a kid growing up, we would always hang out at my buddy Johnny's house. Everybody loved Johnny's house because he had the perfect side yard to play sports in. He had a swimming pool, a couple different game systems, and he kept the Sunny D lights on deck. Y'all remember the Sunny Ds? Yes. Johnny's house was popping when we were kids. But there was one thing about Johnny that I'll never forget, and that was the way that he always used to talk to his mom. He would yell, call her names, and God forbid if she forgot something or messed something up, it wouldn't be pretty. You see, now this didn't happen all the time, but it did happen enough to where it became a conversation afterwards. And the conversation would typically start with, my mama would have knocked my teeth out. You see, and as time went on, what we realized was that the only reason Johnny felt like it was even okay to talk to her like that was because that's how his dad talked to her. And his dad didn't correct it when he did it either. You see, it was sad. It is sad. Because Johnny is still single today, and that's probably why. And I don't know if this is why, but it might be because Johnny doesn't know what it means to respect a woman. He doesn't. How we talk to our spouse is important. How we talk about our spouse to other people is just as important too. See, growing up, when my parents divorced at 9, there's one thing I could say about my mom, and that she never said anything about my dad that was negative around me. She never said one negative thing about my dad. And today I appreciate that. I so appreciate that because I see kids or parents badmouth the other parent if they don't live in the same home. If there's a divorce, they talk so badly about the parent in front of the kids, and it drives me crazy. So how you talk about your spouse or how you talk about your ex-spouse in front of your kids, it matters. It's important. So hear me say this. When I say you can come in here and you can check off your God box, you can show up here every Sunday morning, lift your hands during worship, and give your 10%. But if you walk out of here and you talk to your wife like a dog, you're missing it. You are. So you have got to prioritize this. You have got to prioritize the important. 1, your relationship with him, and 2, your marriage. You see, when you focus on these 2 things, you're literally building a foundation that is solid enough to support your kids the way that they deserve. You see, when you and your spouse are operating at your most healthiest, your kids benefit greatly, and that's number 3. This whole message has been about number 3, our kids, this next generation, our future, our legacy. Why would we leave them a puzzle without all the pieces? Why would we do that? I mean, if you look around this generation right now, they call this generation the fatherless generation. I don't know if you knew that. But that's because only 1 in 4 kids have a father in the home in the United States of America right now. That's vital. We cannot leave these kids a puzzle without all the pieces. And there may be a few pieces missing in your life, and that's okay, because when your kids grow up and have kids of their own, they will too see how hard it is. It is hard. Don't think that because we're having this message, this is about judgment. No, this isn't about judgment. This is about me knowing what I've experienced and know how difficult this is. These are convictions that I've had that I'm sharing with you guys. You see, so it's all about influence and impact and preparing our kids to be future adults one day. That's what it's all about. Becoming an intentional parent, becoming intentional about time and the little moments that you have. And becoming intentional about seizing every single one of them. That's the difference. You won't get it right all of the time, and that's okay. I say it all the time, we're not expected to be different, or we're not expected to be perfect, we're expected to be different. We're expected to be aware. Especially now, you are expected to leave here aware. That's why God's got to be our number 1 priority. That's why we have to do everything we can to find ways to put him at the center of it all. Because when he's not, we struggle. And when we don't seek his influence to further ours, we settle for less. We settle for somebody else's idea of what love looks like, what grace looks like, what forgiveness looks like. We settle for what the world's screaming at us. So regardless of where you are today, regardless if you're a parent and your kids are adults, it's never too late. It's not too late. If you're a parent with teenagers, they need you now more than ever. They may act like they don't want to talk. I promise you they want to talk. But it means you actually being real with them and getting down on their level and not acting like you've got your life all figured out and talking from mistakes and talking from failures. They want to talk. If you're a parent with small children, master these moments, because I keep on hearing how fast this time goes by, how this season of life is only here for a short while. And I am not ready to wake up and walk through my house and not have to worry about stepping on toys. I'm not ready to stop picking up baseballs and bicycles and superhero figurines when they're spread out across our yard at the end of the day. Because I know one day I will miss every single bit of it. And we cannot let this moment pass us by, you guys. We must be intentional. I want everybody to stand today, and I'm going to close this in prayer. But my hope is today that you take this and you take this message and you actually apply it to your life and just think, it may not all be about you. There may be only a couple of things that I said that actually resonate with where you are in life today. But apply it, please. Reach out to me. Reach out to some community, small group leaders in our church. We cannot leave our kids with a puzzle without all the pieces. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for every single person in this room, Lord. There's not one perfect person in here. There is not one person who doesn't need this message today, because if it's not about our kids, it's about our spouse, Lord. And if it's not about our spouse, it's about our life. I pray that every single person leaves here with something in mind that they can do to be intentional about. And if they're not, let them pray about it this week and think about it. And think about how they can just add to those moments with their kids. Whether it's praying when they wake up with a nightmare, or praying before they go into the dentist office, whatever it is, just let us teach our kids how to approach life the right way. Father, you've given us a responsibility, the greatest responsibility in the world. And I ask that we carry the weight of that and we let us feel some conviction in knowing that what we do matters. We love you, we thank you, and we're so grateful that we get to do this today. And it's in your name we pray. Amen.